right, guys. So let's come to our mats. And we're going to start laying down nice and flat on our backs. We've got that little space between our low back and the floor. We're going to pull the rib cage in and kind of settle the mid back and the rib cage flush across the mat. Pulling the shoulders kind of down and in. The top of the shoulder doesn't have to make contact with the mat, just the chest is pressing down against the shoulder blades to the floor. We're going to bring our one or two hands under the small of the back and let the shoulders just open and stretch around through the rotator cuff down the top of the arm. And settle the rib cage in, draw the chest down and in. And then we're going to bring our right leg up to tabletop position. Toes are pointed and we're going to hinge at the hip on the inhale. So we're using that one hand or both hands to kind of pin the low back into place. So as that right leg moves, we make sure that there's no movement in the spine. You can do this with one or two arms, or if this is uncomfortable for the shoulder, take the hands out altogether, and you could transition them to the front of the hip to feel if the pelvis is shifting in and out of position. Right foot's going to come back to the mat, resting to the floor. We'll take the left leg up to tabletop and we're going to hinge at the hip. Foot lowers towards the mat. Nice and smooth glide. There should be little to no shift of the pressure of your back against your hand as that leg moves. Left foot comes back to the floor, and then we're going to take our hands behind our head for the chest lift. So fingers are going to interlace. Hands come back behind the head to support the head and neck. And on the exhale, we fold across the mid-ribs to lift the chest. Pausing for a breath at the top, and then slow as the upper back comes down to the floor. Nice deep fold across the mid-ribs as we fold and lift, head, neck, and chest. And smooth on the reset. The arms are fully supporting the head and the neck. There's no pulling of the head forward. Using those upper abdominals to fold and pull in to allow the chest to lift. And one more. We're going to transition the hand or both hands back to the small of the back. Again, remember you can go hands to the hips to track here if the hands under your body is uncomfortable. Or leave it out all together and go arms nice and long by your side. The choice is yours. So I'm going to tuck my hands under the small of my back just to add that gap and that support for the lumbar spine, and bring legs to tabletop. Pulling in through the rib cage, pulling the abdominals down towards the spine. Right leg is going to hinge at the hip to toe tap the mat. I'm going to stay on that right side again. We won't alternate just yet. Pulling navel to spine, ribs and abs knit in. Feeling that even weight of the back against the hands, no matter where the leg is in its movement. And right foot pauses, right leg pauses back to tabletop. Ribs and abs draw in. And left leg begins to move from the hip to try to tap the mat with the foot, either heel or toe. You could dorsiflex if you tend to cramp through the underside of the foot or through the back of the lower leg. One more. and then we'll rest the feet back to the floor. Fingers, once again, are going to interlace. We're going to bring our hands behind the head to move into our chest lift with rotation, taking our time to prime and set the movement and set our upper body into a nice clean position. We fold at the mid-ribs to lift the head, neck, and chest, and we pause at the top for a breath. Next exhale, we're going to rotate over and onto that right shoulder blade and come back to center. Tip and twist over to the left and back through to center. We're allowing that rotation to come from just the mid-ribs, just across the broad line, keeping the legs still. The hips are evenly anchored and weighted to your mat, so there's no twisting through the pelvis, through the lumbar spine as you rotate from side to side. Finding that tilt, that tip to the side. So the distance between the chest and the hip stays the same no matter the direction you're twisting and rotating to. Last one to the left, and then we return to center and reset to the floor. Returning the hands either under the back or on top of the hips or down at your side. Bringing both legs to tabletop, moving into our leg change movement. Take a moment and a breath to pause for the setup. And then on the inhale, the right leg lowers, and exhale, we switch. We're going to alternate that hip hinge, moving the leg in the hip, keeping the back stable and still as you glide the legs, alternating side to side. Ribs draw in. We're pulling our abdominals to the back, engaging the muscles up the back as well to help hold the spine in neutral. We don't want to let the abdominals do all of the work. We want to find that co-contraction of back extensors and abdominals as the legs are moving. And 2 more each side. And feet rest back down to the mat. Legs come together, squeezing and hugging through the inner thigh. We'll bring our arms out to a T position, palms up towards the ceiling. Pull the chest down, flatten the shoulder blades against the floor, and we're going to tip and rock onto that right hip, lifting the left foot and hip off of the mat. But we want to keep that left shoulder blade connected to the floor as you draw the ribs in. Belly pulls in tight. We exhale to bring the legs, the hips back to center, resting that foot to the mat. And then we tip to the left, rotating through the mid-ribs as we pick up that right hip and foot. And back to center. Moving back to the right, picking up that left hip and left foot. Draw the rib cage in deeper. Feel the back of the shoulders connect to the floor more. And center. Twisting through the mid-ribs, we lean on to the left. We pick up that right hip and foot. And center. 1 more each side. And slow to reset to the center. Take a moment to check in with the alignment. Sometimes the rotation can throw the pelvis off a little bit side to side. And we'll return the arms back out to the T, palms up towards the ceiling, and we'll bring our legs to tabletop position. We're going to twist once again through the mid-ribs. Full spine twist supine, tipping onto that right hip, anchoring the left shoulder, and exhale through to center. Rotating over to the left, picking up the right hip as you rotate, anchoring the right side of the back to the mat. Nice smooth glide from side to side. Moving right along the mid-ribs, anchoring the shoulder blades flat against the mat. One more each side. And back to center. The feet rest back to the mat. Arms come nice and long down by your side. We're going to work our pelvic tilt. I want to start first with legs hugged together. We're going to press through the feet, squeeze through inner thighs, and we're going to tilt the hips back. Imprint the low back flat against the mat. Feel the hamstrings engage as you work the tilt. And then we roll back across the hips down towards the tailbone, being mindful of the rib flare. And exhale, hips tilt back. Drawing the rib cage in, drawing the belly to the back, finding that nice hollow, that nice scoop of the core, pulling up and in, and back towards the hip and tailbone. As the hips and the low back are moving, chest, shoulders, the upper half of the rib cage is still. There's no movement of the arms, the shoulders. You're not sliding your spine between the shoulder blades or moving along the mat, just letting the hips tilt, letting the low back flex and decompress. Last one. And resetting back to a neutral spine. We're going to take our feet to a wide stance, almost mat width apart. Imagine your squat stance. You've got a bit of a turnout. Knees and thighs are turned out. Knees are pointing out over the toes. We're turned out a little bit on the wide stance, about shoulder width apart, and we're going to work our wide bridge. On the exhale, we'll tilt the hips back. We're going to pelvic curl, curling up off of the floor, sending the knees out wide towards the toes. As we peel up off the mat, one segment, one vertebra at a time. Next breath, we roll down along the back, piece by piece, vertebra by vertebra, rolling along the spine, back towards the tailbone. And peel and curl up. Pressing into the feet, feeling the back of the legs engage as you work up into that bridge. And slow on the descent down to the floor. Same idea as with the pelvic tilt. We want no movement in the chest or in the shoulders. So there's no sliding of the upper body up and down the mat. We want to fix the shoulder blades flat against the floor, pinning them to the same place on the mat, and allowing the rest of our body to move around where we fix the shoulder blades and the chest to the mat. So the hips are lifting up, we're sending the knees forward towards the toes. We need the legs, the knees to move towards the feet to allow the hip to come up so the upper body doesn't shift up out of position. So find that hinge, that movement at the ankle. Pivot at the ankle as you send the shins forward, the knees towards the toes. One more bridge. And we'll walk our feet, our legs back to center in line with our sit bones. And I'm going to return my hands back to the small of my back. Remember, this position is optional. And I'll bring the legs to tabletop, finding that engagement through the ribs, through the core, working into our single leg extensions. We reach that right leg out and slightly up, and slow to bring that leg back. Drawing up through the abdominals as the left leg lengthens. We're going to alternate single leg extensions. Reaching out nice and long, maintaining that same position of the low back and the same pressure against the back of your hands if you're working this hand under spine position. Reaching the leg farther and longer, stretching out nice and long, pulling the rib cage in, drawing the chest down. Feel the weight of the shoulder blades down against the mat. One more each side. And we pause at center. On our inhale, we're going to hinge at the hip. Keep the bend in the knee, and we reach towards the mat with the feet. I won't go all the way for my first few, and then draw the legs back to tabletop on that exhale. Inhale, hinging at the hip, keeping the bent knee. Trying to reach the feet down towards the mat, and exhale back to tabletop. We're only moving from the hip joint. Try to feel if the pressure of your back is coming up off of your hands as the legs lower towards the floor. We want to avoid the hips tipping forward with the legs. Last 3. And feet rest to the mat. Align the feet and the legs up with the sit bones. Arms come out and reach up overhead as long as the rib cage doesn't flare and the upper back does not arch. On the exhale, arms flow forward. We lift the head, neck, and chest, folding deep at the mid-ribs. And slow to reset back to the floor. Exhale, arms flow forward. Nice deep fold at the mid-ribs, maintaining that little gap at the small of the back. As the chest is lifting, the head and the neck doesn't crane forward. We just lift the chest higher. 2 more. Fingers interlace. We bring our hands back behind the head to support the head and the neck. Take a moment to reset the spine. We'll bring our legs to tabletop. And we're going to fold and lift at the mid-ribs to lift head, neck, and chest. We're going to work into our crisscross, but I want to stay on one side first before changing. So the right leg is going to reach out nice and long out over the mat, and then the chest is going to rotate left and center. Rotate only to the left and center. 3, 2, and 1. Right leg to tabletop. Reset the upper body back to the floor and fold and lift. Head, neck and chest. Left leg extends out over the mat and we twist to the right. Only to the right. And 3, 2, and 1. Back to center. Draw knees to the chest, shoulders drop back to the floor. You can hug the knees in towards the chest before we go back into the crisscross movement again. And then legs return to tabletop. Fingers interlace, hands behind the head. And we fold and lift, head, neck, and chest. We reach that right leg forward, twist left, and then switch to the other side. We're going to alternate from side to side. Nice and smooth rotation as we twist through the mid-ribs. One more each side. And upper body resets. Pull the knees in towards the chest. We'll move into that happy baby stretch, reaching for the feet as you draw the knees about shoulder width apart. Let the back decompress and settle against the mat, and you can rock a little bit from hip to hip. If you can't reach the toes, grab the back of the legs. And slow to unwind. Taking a moment to reset the back, we're going to reach that left leg out nice and long across the mat. My hands are going to rest here at the front of the hips, and we'll bring our right leg up to tabletop position. I'm going to reach the right leg forward, straight out over the mat, into that extension, and then back to tabletop. Warming up here, we're going to go into leg circles after a few of these single leg extensions. Making sure that the hips are level as the leg glides. And straight right leg comes up. We're going to cross our midline. So the right leg comes across over the left. We come down, circle out, back up and around to the top. So we're going to make a full counterclockwise circle with this right leg. Two more. And we'll return to tabletop. Another set of single leg extensions, reaching forward and drawing that leg back on the exhale. Inhale to stretch and lengthen that right leg as we draw in tight both through the abdominals and the muscles up the back. Last one. And right leg lifts up towards the ceiling. We're going clockwise circle, out at the top, circle down, cross your midline. The leg sweeps over the left and around, reaching that right leg out nice and long. Last two. And the right leg settles to the mat. Take a moment to reset. Check in with your setup and the alignment of your spine. And we'll bring left leg to tabletop. Extending on the inhale, that left leg reaches out nice and long and slides back. Inhale to extend. Brace through the mid-ribs. Pull your belly to your back and lengthen. Left leg extends up towards the ceiling. We're going to go clockwise circles first. So the left leg comes across, over to the right, sweeps down, circles out at the bottom, and back around to the top. Last two. Left leg is long, reaching out. And left leg to tabletop. Take a moment to reset, and we inhale to extend that left leg forward. Finding that full extension of the knee, pulling the rib cage down. Belly pulls in tight. One more single leg extension. And then the left leg comes up. For counterclockwise circles, we go out at the top, sweep down, come across the right side, and all the way up to the top. I want to make full circles. Last two. And the leg left rests down to the mat. Take a moment to reset. Arms are going to come up towards the ceiling. We're going to work into our roll up, bringing chin to chest. We forward fold on that inhale, and then exhale to scoop and curl. Rolling and stretching forward out over the legs, letting the low back round. Not too much upper back rounding. We want to keep the shoulders sliding down and back. Focus that flexion, that rounding through the low back, so the upper back doesn't round forward, the chest doesn't cave in, and we keep a stronger position for the upper spine. And next exhale, we're going to curl back along the spine, piece by piece, gliding the shoulders down, keeping the neck nice and long as we curl back along the spine to the floor. Ribs knit in strong as the arms go overhead to block that rib flare, that back extension, and arms come forward, chin to chest, forward fold at the mid ribs. We curl and roll up, and we reach out, stretching nice and long, and curling back piece by piece. Nice and strong, reaching far. Slow as we roll along the back to the floor, piece by piece. Remember, you can roll back just as far as you can support the movement. So starting in that seated position and then only rolling back to the floor as far as you can without the legs lifting up off of the mat is a nice way to modify the movement, to just roll back part way. So as you get that stretch and length through the spine, more abdominal control and engagement, then you can start working lower to the floor. Diving forward over the leg, stretching out nice and long. We're going to dorsiflex at the ankle, try to reach for the toe, and I'm going to walk my hips out a little bit so I'm not so tucked under. Reaching for the feet, pressing the back of the legs down for that extra stretch up the back of the legs. And slow to restack the spine, sitting up nice and tall. We're going to come to a kneeling position. You could do this one seated with straight legs or bent knees if you want to stay off of your knee, because we're going to do the thigh stretch and that hinge. I'm going to start first with this turnout. So my legs are turned out, pointing towards the edges of the mat. Feet are pressing together behind me, so I'm squeezing my heels together, squeezing through the glutes. And there's a full opening through the front of the pelvis. There's no break here. I want to really feel the tailbone tucked under. Arms are going to come to the front, and we're going to hinge at the knee to lean back towards the feet and rise. Nice and smooth as we hinge at the knee. Drawing the shoulders back and down. Feel that stretch up the front of the thigh. It's very easy to fall out of position and lean with the shoulders first. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the low back. So we want to make sure that we are pulling up through pelvic floor, lower, middle, upper abdominals are fully engaged. We're using those back extensors and engaging our glutes, and we're falling back, hips to heels. And rise. 2 more. And pausing here. We're going to sit back towards the heels with our hips, and then engage the glutes. Press the hips forward, coming up nice and tall, and then sit back and up. Working those muscles along the quad. Not sitting all the way down to the feet. You could always work a standing squat if you want to be off of your knees. One more. And we go parallel legs. Lining the feet and the legs up with the sit bones so we're no longer in that turnout. Hands are going to come across the chest now. It's going to be a little bit more challenging because we don't have that lever arm out here to help support us as we fall back. Shoulders roll back and down. Nice tuck of the tailbone. We hinge at the knee to fall back towards the feet and rise. Being mindful not to shrug the shoulders too much. We want to push those shoulders down the back. And we hinge at the knee. Nice and smooth glide. Pressing the hips forward slightly as we hinge at the knee to keep that stretch moving up the quad and into the front of the hip. Last 2. And fingers can interlace. Hands behind the head. You could keep them across the chest. And we sit back towards the heels and kneel tall. If you want to come off of the knees, you could come up to a standing position and work that standing squat. Or that chair sit position if you want to work a more parallel, narrow stance. Last 3. And up nice and tall. Going into our lunge stretch, we're going to bring our right foot forward to the mat. I'm going to straighten the back leg to bring the knee up off of the floor since we've been kneeling for some time. You could do this standing fully in that split stance lunge, even using a wall in front of you for balance. And just holding that stretch, pressing the hips down, taking the pressure off of the knee, stretching and lengthening the spine, slightly lifting the chest, holding for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll drop the knee, and then we'll walk the right foot across the mat and lay the leg down. We'll go into that pigeon stretch, pressing the hips forward and down as we lift the chest up. and a little side to side movement. And we'll slide that right leg back. Bringing the left foot up and forward. We're going to come up and off of that right knee. Again, you can come up to a standing position. Use a wall for support as needed if you want to, being in a more upright position versus this low lunge. Shoulders roll back and down. We're pulling our rib cage in. We still need to keep the alignment of the spine and that engagement of the abdominals and the back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll drop the right knee to the mat. Walk the left foot across the mat and lay the leg down onto the floor. Nice proud chest. The shoulders are rolling back and down. And we're going to hinge and kind of shift from side to side. One more breath. And then we'll slide that left leg back, go knees wide, sit back into your child's pose, drop the heels to the hip, and the chest down between the thighs. On the next exhale, we slowly restack the spine, sitting up nice and tall, nice and long. And we're going to come to a seated position to work another rotational stretch. I'm going to wrap my left foot, left leg under my right bent knee around to the outside of the hip. And then take that right leg around the outside of the left thigh. I don't want my feet so close to the legs where I can't set my hips down. I want to feel the weight of my right hip firmly anchored to the mat, so I'm not rocked off of it. So you may have to move that left foot out just a little bit so you can put the hip down onto the floor. Sitting up nice and tall, nice and long, extending the spine, lifting the chest to increase that stretch in the right hip. And then we'll wrap that left arm around that right knee. We're going to twist back, look back over that right shoulder, pressing the hip down against the mat and extending the spine nice and long, nice and tall. One more breath. And then slow to unwind. And we're going to switch legs. So knees are bent. We're lacing that right leg under and through. And I'm going to keep some space between the heel and the hip. Wrapping that left leg around the outside of the right thigh. A little bit of space. I need to be able to put that left hip down onto the mat and not be rocked up off of it. Left hip is down. We're sitting nice and tall, extending the back, stretching tall to drive that stretch into that left hip. The right arm wraps around that left knee, and we're going to twist back, look back over that left shoulder. Reaching up, proud chest, shoulders rolled back and down. And slow to unwind. We're going to sit cross-legged or a comfortable position for your feet and for your legs. Maybe it's cross-legged or bent knee or even straight legs. We're going to bring our right arm across the body, hook up with that left elbow, open the chest as we pull that right arm across the body. And slow to open. You could do this single-armed if you need to, modify it all, just bringing that arm across to feel that stretch. We're going to take that right arm up overhead, drop the hand down behind the head and neck, trying to press between the shoulder blades, and then pulling that elbow up towards the ceiling. If you want to add to that stretch, the left hand will come up and over, collect that right elbow, and pull that elbow behind the head. And slow to unwind. Left arm is going to come across the body, and you can work just this stretch here, or add the right arm to hook to bring that stretch along the top of the arm from the shoulder, proud chest, flat back. And unwind. Left arm comes up overhead. You may need to work just this overhead movement. Maybe you can't bend the elbow, bring the hand behind the back. So find the movement that works for you. I'm going to bend the elbow, place the left hand behind the back between the shoulder blades. Push my head back into my forearm. And then to add more to it, my right hand comes up and over to grab that left elbow and pull the arm across. One more breath. And slow to unwind. The arms come forward. We walk the hands, the arms out. We round and stretch the back. And next breath, we curl and restack. Sitting up nice and tall, stretching long towards the ceiling, dropping the shoulders down. Head tilts to the left, bringing the left ear to the shoulder, back to center, right ear to right shoulder. We just want the head to move, no movement in the torso. Your upper body's not tipping to the side. You're keeping the even weight from hip to hip as the head and the neck stretches to one side. Last one. And resting. All right, guys. Awesome work today.